All right, let's take you back to one of the top stories we're tracking for you around the MK party. The interdict, or the attempt at an interdict for the first sitting of Parliament, which is scheduled for this Friday, and a whole range of other issues, including ousted party leader Jabulani Khumalo. Dr. Ongama Mtimka is a political analyst. Can you hear us now, Dr. Mtimka? The picture seemed to have frozen just as we were going to our conversation.
Yes, I can hear you, Michelle. I was saying what's interesting about Jabulani Khumalo at the moment is that he is acting seemingly alone. So there isn't a coordinated faction that has developed around him that is threatening MK party, at least if the singular messaging is anything to go by. I know that yesterday there were a lot of, there was some letter circulating saying purportedly from within MK party saying, MPs, please go to Parliament. You don't want to be fighting personal battles of former President Jacob Zuma. But I don't know whether there were any colleagues in the media that could verify that in fact came within MK party. So if it did not, then he's still a lone ranger. And in that sense, is not that thing which we generally see when cracks begin in a party that can actually undo it. That said, it's interesting how MK party has been here, Michelle, in the sense that they from the onset, they are choosing the style that former President Zuma has had in politics of being a battering ram on institutions with a view to seeing how where he can open a gap that can allow him to do things differently.
But fair to say, Dr. Mtimka, that Zuma is the MK party and the MK party is Jacob Zuma.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that he's got his stranglehold in the party is quite firm at the moment. They are singing from the same song sheet, save for the lone expeditions of Mr. Khumalo.
What does this mean? Let's begin with the issue of trying to interdict the first sitting of Parliament on Friday. If indeed the MK party, with its 59 seats, are not there for the first sitting on Friday, Parliament has said that there isn't an issue of corating, that isn't an issue, and that has that rule in the Constitution has been misunderstood by the MK party. Be that as it may, it's still 59 seats. It's still a substantial percentage of the 400 seats in Parliament. What does that mean in terms of the start of the 7th administration?
Well, it means we have a new player who comes in and wants to shake the system based on testing some of the rules. And this is the second bout with that kind of entry into the National Assembly following the EFF. Now, former President Zuma is quite interesting, or the MK party is quite interesting in how it is undertaking all of this. One would argue that they have every right to challenge, outcomes of elections if they are not certain about them. The only challenge is that they keep saying they've got tons of evidence. But today, or as of the last few minutes before I jumped on the call, I had not yet seen any indication that they had lodged a complaint with the Electoral Commission, with the Electoral Court, where they should have lodged a dispute. And then what I'm seeing instead is them petitioning the Constitutional Court. And I saw an extract from that submission that says, even though we have tons of evidence that can prove that what we should have submitted to the Electoral Court is credible, we still haven't done it, and we're not going to do it as part of this interdict. So it's a futile. It seems to me like a futile exercise, whose object is seemingly to create some uncertainty, to serve as a battering ram on the process, without a legitimate legal outcome. I emphasize legal, Michelle, because it seems to me that this is the kind of strategy that creates an impression of appealing to the legal processes without actually meeting the requirements for it. And it seems to me that this is actually a political agitation. You are creating an impression of playing by the book for a susceptible membership, which you hope to manipulate for political ends. Because if the MK party is coming into the legal processes and theirs is seeking a legal outcome, they would be making the submissions where they need to make the submissions. But because they are not doing so, I can only conclude that theirs is creating an impression of playing the legal game, when in fact theirs is a political outcome that they seek. And that political outcome is perpetual victimhood, perpetual it's continuing to be framed as victims, because you can only get a legal outcome from the courts, but the political end of what they are doing is to create this impression that the courts are part of a grand political agenda to neutralize them.
The courts and perhaps even institutions like the IEC. When former President Jacob Zuma was at the Results Operations Center just before the results were declared, I think it was on Saturday after the elections, he made quite strong statements about what the risk would be to the country in terms of possible violence. I'm not sure whether violence was the word that he used, but it was a veiled, a not so veiled threat to the IEC not to release the results, because I think the words he used was they will be provoking us, quote unquote.
Yeah, so it started with two things about that. One, there's if you have a dispute, there's a procedure to submit disputes. In that presser, he was creating the impression that they weren't given enough time to deal with the disputes. The IEC came in and said, actually, they have disputes, about 579 of them. And they went through, but they were not of the view that they were not going to deal with those. And so announcing results was under threat. And indeed, the next day, they did say that they've addressed a lot of the complaints and found some of them to be frivolous. So they proceed and make an announcement. For President Zuma and MK Party, you could not have arrived at a conclusion at the same time that you were saying you still have issues, that your issues necessitated a postponement of the results, without getting from the IEC how long it was going to take them to process those results. So you're quite right, it was a threat. Likewise, even today, to say the Parliament must be postponed or interdicted, when you have not even submitted your issues in the courts that are supposed to deal with the issue, the electoral court in this case, is attempting to bully the country into making decisions on the basis of political rather than procedural issues that need to be addressed.
Perhaps just as a last comment from you, Dr. Mtimka, as we all discuss the possible permutations of a coalition government, a government of national unity, there have been various permutations that have pros and cons. In your opinion, what does a successful, for the betterment of the country, for the stability of a future in South Africa, what does that government look like?
Sure. So when you negotiate coalitions, it's not uncommon that the first step that political parties take is to attempt to sideline others and secure a coalition with a particular group. The ANC, knowing the precarious situation that it found itself in, said, we are going to approach everybody at once, immediately. And I think that when they did that, they took away the game theoretic or the zero-sum approach to crafting the coalitions, at least as far as who is involved around the table. As a result of that, my view is that whichever coalition is an outcome of this process, there is no party that can say they were not included. They were sidelined as part of the strategy, among the big parties at least, as part of the strategy of the ANC to work with only a particular party. And so my sense is that come Friday, whatever coalition we have is a coalition that is best under the circumstances, and a coalition which, if it has got the right counterbalancing between those who want to push us away from the center to the left or to the right, will be a coalition that we would need to support and work with.
Certainly. Dr. Ongama Mtimka, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. We don't have to like each other to be able to work together, do we?